Okay, so now we have the end of 5 printing well. It's time to do something with my Flux Delta. So I'm going to take it apart, salvage anything vaguely useful, and just get rid of everything that's not. So things I'm thinking off the top of my head, there's 5 stepper motors in it because it's got the 3 columns for the extruder, and also that turntable has a stepper motor underneath it. It's driven by a Raspberry Pi, so that's reusable. I'm thinking the bearings and the pulleys are useful. The towers are definitely salvageable and reusable. The micro switches, again, the end stops for the towers, also very reusable. For fun, I might try and get the 2 little visible red lasers out of those scanning towers. The pressure sensors. Yeah, there's quite a lot of potentially useful parts in this. So we'll see what we can salvage. You can see I've made a start in dismantling it. So we have the hot end off. Again, there's a working hot end in there, which has a thermistor and a hot end. So again, essentially reusable. The rods from the towers, they're normally just magnet on. I'm not going to get rid of those. These were printed for it to hold my reel, so they're only really specific to this, so they're going to go. You can see by the box of screws, this isn't just screws from this. This is just to collect random box of screws. But you can see I've taken them out and we've already got the top off. So now you can see what I'm on about. You've got the micro switches, the pulleys. I'm not sure about the belt yet. We've also got the towers, the extruder stepper motor, which feels nice. We've got a decent spring in there. We might have that as well. That board is very unique, very specific. I don't know I'm going to get a lot of use out of that, so I'm going to take it out anyway to recycle it properly, but it's going to go. I'm not keeping that. So I'm going to take all this apart and then we'll work down to the bottom end and see what we can salvage, like I said. Okay, next off, the extruder. This is actually an upgraded extruder. A couple of years ago, not long after it came out, they made an upgraded model of the printer called the Plus. They did a kit for the originals that had upgraded parts. So they upgraded this was an all-metal extruder, apparently. I know they changed the drive knurled wheel. It was smaller, so it had more. The first one had it was such a big drive wheel, the original. It extruded far too much or far too little. You could never dial it in. So they upgraded the part, changed this arm, and had much better control afterwards. So for useful parts, you've got this decent spring. It's quite a strong spring, to the point where I bodged it, drilled a hole and shoved a wood screw through it to stop it, but you can see where it skidded sideways too many times. So we'll have the spring. Not sure there's a lot of use for the filament entry point. It's kind of too small to do anything with. I'll probably get rid of it. This is a quite free spinning pulley on what feels like a nice-ish bearing. So we'll probably keep that. And obviously we're going to keep the stepper motor. I don't know if it's any. Oh, okay, we have got part numbers on it. I don't know if that's good, but it is a working stepper motor. Now with little steam engines, we can turn these things into quite decent generators, especially if I'm able to put a turbine on it, which is the intention. So yeah, we'll take this apart and put the bits in the salvage box. Just taken out the tower micro switches, all on one common harness, but that doesn't mean they can't be separated. I'm never going to use the plug again. I'm thinking they could be track sensors, signal switches, end stops again for an automated drive yourself thing. You know, possibilities. And there's not much left up the top. We've got these cables, but they run down the length of it. I will be salvaging those two. They've got to be reusable as something or other. Bit of a data bus somewhere. That looks like power, but again, they're all reusable. So next thing is to take the tops of the towers off, spring the drive belts off, and work our way down. Lost its head, we've decapitated it. Sprung these off. They're pretty short, we won't be reusing those. But now there's nothing to those, so we can slide those off the top. You can see the cables run up the middle. There's one on every corner. And then we're into the base. Okay, with the screws let go, these just come out. Now these are, you see they're threaded, well you can't quite see because it won't focus on them, but they're threaded in the ends. And they what appear to be stainless. There's not a mark of rust or corrosion on them. So we've got 6 of those, 2 from each corner, so they'll be quite useful parts. Quite useful stock material. I'm sure we can find uses for bloody big piston rods for all I care. Or axles. Might make some good axles. But either way, there's 6 of them, so we'll certainly be keeping all of those. You never know what you can find, what you can make out of old electronics. Slight change of plan. Just taken the bottom cover off, and I was going to bin it straight down there, but it is, albeit thin, but still. I wonder if we could get a steam engine mounted on it of some description. No sort of printed one, although the irony in that would be quite funny. But that's not being binned anymore. This is a good bit of steel. And it's painted. Bonus. Which then brings us on to the innards. Now, there's quite a lot going on in here. Also, we've got the 3 stepper motors. We've got a Raspberry Pi Model A. The difference being it's got no ports on the end of it. So Pi 1, I believe. Might be wrong. Might be a Pi 2. You never know. But we've also got this main control board, which does the Pi. Now these, as far as I know, don't have any kind of Wi-Fi in them. But it does on here. There's some kind of Atmel chip there, I'm guessing. This has its own firmware controlled, which this talks to over. Well, it's kind of confusing. It talks over the GPIO pins and the USB. I'm guessing for options and or speed. But bonus to these 3 step motors, you've got this one down here as well, which drives the turntable. You also got a button on the side and the camera, which is in there. So I'll be seeing what we can salvage. We'll grab all these cables out. I might save this. It's got Wi-Fi and USB connections. I don't know if I'll be able to make use of any of the rest of it, but I'm definitely salvage the Pi and the motors and the lasers. First things out of the base, the laser towers. They are visible red, but I've got no idea on their power, but presumably tiny. And as a bonus, more metal, more useful metal parts, pins, maybe little axles for stationary engines. These are what the towers slid up and down on. Keeping. Next thing was the camera taken out, out of which came 2 tiny little springs. My hands are filthy after all the grease out of this thing. But again, keeping the springs. What else did we get? Another nice little bit of sheet metal. Only small, but I only make small things. In the box. And last but not least, the camera module. Now, this is again an upgraded part from the upgrade kit. There's not a lot in the way of markings on it, but there's also not a lot of connections on the end there. So this, I'm gonna guess this is some form of USB. I may be wrong and blow it up when I try that, or blow up a computer when I try that, but I'm not going to try it on a computer, I'm trying a Pi. Because if I can get an image out of it, hello time-lapse on the Ender 5, without the GoPro, just sort of stuck on the frame. Next out, the Pi. So what could we see on it? It's a Pi A V1.1 from 2014. That shows you when I got this, how old this printer is now, and how it's finally failed. It wasn't powered on the power port, so I'm going to assume power came through GPIO pins. Single USB, unused camera, display, HDMI and microphone and sound port, and an 8 gig micro SD card. It's amazing what you can get out of broken things, isn't it? You guessed it. Keep. Okay, next onto the mystery control daughter board thing. Mystery controller board out. Now, again, not good with electronics, so I don't know what most of this does. Those four have got to be the motor, the step and driver motors for the base, because you've got one for each tower, plus the turntable. An Atmel, oh, it's an ARM, so it's a proper little processor. We might be able to do something useful with this. To look that up and see what we can do with it. Port wise, many connections. Those two were the lasers. That's the power connector. So we'll keep those together. There's the Wi-Fi thingy, which I'm getting, and focus. Yeah, USB Wi-Fi. So there's a lot of USB. More USB ports. So this must be a proper little thing in itself, because this port is not forwarded on its power to the Pi and spoke over USB and that header to the Pi. And how broken this printer is, this isn't even in the control board, this is a replacement because the original burnt out. Yeah. Interesting, there's a JTAG header in the middle as well. But again, if anyone knows it, out of the 7 people that are going to watch this video, if anyone knows anything interesting I can do with this, or if I can use it standalone, albeit without any display coming out of it, but if I can make it drive stepper motors, yeah, see what I'm going, then we can do something interesting with it. If not, I'll still try and do something interesting with it. It's got 2 USB, micro and full size, and ports, and Wi-Fi, and power. So we must be able to do something interesting with it. I just don't know what. In the box it goes. Not much left. So cables and motors. Looking really empty now. So we've got the power jack out. And 3 stepper motors with some quite substantial pulleys on them. And decent little mounts. So they're all going to stay together. I'm going to keep them all. If I want them separately, I'll take them all apart later. But good motors. Well, I don't think good motors, but they're working stepper motors. You don't need to be a good motor to be turned into a generator. Cables and wires. Check. And now the turntable, which again is actually quite nice, and I think I can reuse it as an actual turntable or as a display turntable, if you know what I mean. It's a shame about this base, but I think I can print a new housing for it. I can keep the same motor in there, but yep, more keeping. Now all that's left are these pressure sensors, which I definitely want. I think they definitely have some usage. I just don't know how to get them out. So I'm going to try not to break them, because they are only little floppy things. So I don't want to tear them. But other than that, we'll cut back to this once I've taken these out. And I'll lay out all the bits I've got that we've salvaged. And we'll see just how much we have actually got, because it's, I'll tell you now, it's a lot more than I thought we would. Well, no, could not salvage those. They just all split. They were stuck into their little sockets. So on removal, they just split right apart, which is a shame. But oh well, that was only ever going to be a bonus. Yeah, so here we have it. It looks like I'm keeping most of it, to be honest. We've got a lot of parts out of it. Whole huge range of cabling. Many strands, some data, some power. All good. And we have the those extrusions that ran the cables up the towers. You never know, there might be cable runs again, or rails, or, you know. We have the big stainless tower bars. We have the smaller stainless rods out of the lasers, the bit of sheet metal, the lasers themselves, the camera, the hot end, the turntable with its little pancake motor, the print bed. It's a solid bit of steel, why not? The extruder stepper motor, the other stepper motors, whole host of screws, some springs, the rods with balls on the end, which I'm sure will have a use. The control boards, the pie, more stepper motors, the main base. We got a lot out of this. Oh yeah, and the nice little bearing on the pulley wheel for the extruder. We got a lot out of this. The only bits I'm throwing away is essentially the casing, the bottom and the top parts. Excuse my foot. I haven't forgot about the trolleys that went up and down the towers, but they are covered in grease, so I'm not taking them apart now. But I will do to salvage the bearings out of them. Even though I might see if I can salvage the belts. I'm not too fussed about the belts. But always recycle what you can. Dispose of stuff responsibly if you need to. Otherwise, most things, as you can see, will have a life as something in a future project of some description. I'm not usually pro recycling, but when it gives you free stuff for the future, free materials, free parts, I'm all for it.